A warm welcome for IRF in the context of human rights moderator, CEO of Hong Kong Watch, Benedict Rogers, and panelists, President, Freedom House, Michael Abramowitz, Special Rapporteur on Freedom for Religion or Belief, United Nations, Nazila Ghania, Assistant to the Administrator and Bureau of Conflict Prevention and Stabilization, USAID, Robert Jenkins.
Well, good afternoon. It is such a privilege to be at this amazing Earth Summit and to moderate this really important, distinguished panel. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as we heard earlier today from Jan Fiegel, protects the right to freedom of religion or belief, and in its broad sense, the right to thought, conscience, and religion. Yet there are still some who think that somehow religious freedom is something separate from human rights, either because they think that it is a right only for religious people, and therefore if they are of a secular or non-religious mind, they think it doesn't concern them, or because they think that it is about promoting a certain religion, or promoting religion itself, or they think somehow it's at odds with other human rights. But they could not be more wrong. I've worked in this field for almost 30 years, mainly in Asia, and I just want to share two very brief stories to frame the discussion. A few years ago, I visited in prison a young man in a remote jail in Indonesia who was jailed not because of his faith, but because he did not have one. He is an atheist. But freedom of religion or belief protects his right to be an atheist as much as it protects my right to be a Christian. I was actually taken to meet him by a driver and an interpreter who were both Muslims. It almost sounds like the beginning of a joke, two Muslims, a Christian and an atheist. But I campaigned for the release of that young man, not because I endorse his beliefs, but because I defend his right to have them. In Hong Kong today, almost all other freedoms of expression, the press, assembly, association, have already been dismantled. And now, as firstly a new report that Hong Kong Watch published recently called Sell Out My Soul, and a new report launched today by the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong as well, shows religious freedom in Hong Kong is the last freedom now under assault. Jimmy Lai, a 76-year-old entrepreneur and pro-democracy campaigner, is currently in prison and on trial for defending democracy, freedom of expression, and media freedom, but also as a devout Catholic motivated by his faith, he's defending religious freedom. And by the way, I've been asked to say that tonight an amazing documentary about Jimmy Lai called The Hong Konger will be screened at 7 o'clock in the Georgetown room with a panel, so do come along to that. But those are just a couple of examples of how religious freedom intersects with wider human rights. Indeed, you can't have religious freedom without the other freedoms of expression, association, and assembly. And so I'm delighted to have this discussion with this really distinguished panel, and I'm going to go straight into it with, firstly, Nazila Ghania. Nazila, you are the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, and your mandate is part of the special procedures of the UN human rights system. Can you tell us what does that tangibly imply about the relationship between freedom of religion or belief and other human rights?
Thank you very much for that question, and it's an honor to be here and of course also to serve as the Special Rapporteur. There are more than 50 Special Rapporteurs of the UN human rights system. The mandate of the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief is one of the oldest and longest standing of those mandates. It's existed for 38 years. In a couple of months, it will be 38 years. You know, it's puzzling why there's still a question about the relationship of freedom of religion or belief and human rights. When the United Nations was created 78 years ago, Faith-based actors, religious communities were amongst the proponents of having an international organization. Even before, at the time of the creation of the League of Nations, they were a strong force for the creation of the League of Nations and indeed for peace. With each of the mandates and many of the causes that the UN human rights machinery has taken up over the decades, faith-based actors and religious communities have been a key factor. In many of them, they've been a strong force for human rights. Yet there is this question of, is freedom of religion or belief an orphaned human rights? Is it sort of a weaker mechanism? And what is the relationship? I think the question arises on both sides. I don't like to talk about both sides because I want there to be, for us to have an understanding between them, but really faith-based actors and religious communities might feel that they are diminished when the protection is for thought, conscience, and religion. Does that mean that having a religion is equivalent to some of the matters of conscience that sometimes are protected under Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the equivalents in other regional systems? For example, Article 9 of the European Court of Human Rights. Pacifism, veganism, these are some of the rights that have enjoyed some of the areas that have been protected under, for example, Article 9 or Article 18. But this is not an equivalency. It's just that matters of conscience are protected within the legal framework of human rights within this category. So we are not saying, the courts are not saying that veganism is a religion, and they're not saying that pacifism is a religion. It's just that it is still, when it is a matter of seriousness, coherence, and of importance to the holder, then it should enjoy protection. What we see in the UN human rights standards is also many clarifications. So, for example, the General Comment 22, which interprets Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, emphasizes that there should be no coercion in matters of religion or belief. I think this is a very robust, it's very robust. It can offer the opportunity to articulate and to be able to protect many rights. Now, it could be that a victim who is in prison, who happens to be a prisoner of conscience because of their religion, they might be willing to sacrifice all of their rights because they believe in an afterlife, or upholding truth or justice is more important for them even than being able to be released from detention and not to suffer torture. So in that sense, human rights will not sideline other of their rights in order for them to insist upon their religion. But international law never fully understands the victim or the victim of injustice. Do we imagine that persons with disability feel that the standards on disabilities fully understand them? Do we think that children whose rights are often violated, that feel that the Committee on the Rights of the Child and the Convention on the Rights of the Child fully understands the intricacies of childhood? Law is always a poor approximation to what is being experienced by victims. But nevertheless, I think that as persons of religion or belief, on the one hand, I think the Kokkinakis judgment, which was the first judgment of the European Court of Human Rights, said that even those who are unconcerned about matters of religion or belief should be deeply concerned about this freedom. Why? Because generations, centuries of bloodshed have led us to this conviction that freedom of religion or belief is for everybody, regardless of religion, non-religion, and all matters of conscience. And on the other hand, I think that faith-based actors and those who are passionate about religion or belief also have a lot to give to the broader human rights movement.
Thank you very much, Nazila. I'm going to turn to Mike Abramovitz now. From your perspective at Freedom House, can you tell us how the treatment of religious minorities serves as an indicator of a country's democratic health?
Sure, that's a great question, Ben, and great to be with you and such a distinguished panel. It's an honor. and thank you to the organizers for having me. I think most of you know Freedom House. It's an incredible mission. We've been around for 83 years, and our aspiration is really quite simple, which is we want a world in which all are free. And that's what we're working to. And sadly, in the last 7 years since I've been the president of Freedom House, that goal seems to have been slipping slightly away. As for those of you who follow Freedom House, you know that we are in the 17th year of a democratic recession. Whether there's a 18th year, we'll find out on February 29th when we put out our latest version of Freedom in the World. But essentially what that shows is that every year for the past 17 years, more countries have suffered declines in political rights and civil liberties than those that have had improvements. And clearly one major through line of our reporting is religious freedom, freedom of conscience. All that is under attack. You just think about some of the major crises that we've been following. China with respect to the Uyghurs and the Tibetan Buddhists. India with respect to Muslims. Iran with respect to the Baha'is and other religious minorities. What you see is that some of the countries where we have the most concern about either democratic backsliding or just simply rank authoritarianism, you see that persecution and repression of religious minorities figures very deeply in that. So I think there is a connection. One point I'd like to make for our audience is that this issue of freedom of religion is a central, important issue for Freedom House. So we do have freedom in the world in which freedom of religion is one of the factors we look at as part of that. But we also have a very aggressive and ambitious programmatic focus on religious freedom. And we are working to support those activists who are being persecuted for their religious beliefs with all sorts of different help, legal help, relocation help. Hundreds of people under our programs have been supported. So this is a big issue for Freedom House. And why is it? It's because we really see that when you attack one's freedom of religion, faith, it's not only an attack on faith, but it's really an attack on fundamental human rights and human dignity. And so it's very central to who we are at Freedom House.
Fantastic. Robert Jenkins, from your work in USAID, how does religious freedom feature in conflict situations, both as a cause, but also as a solution, and how does it intersect with other causes of conflict?
Well, thank you very much, Ben, and thank you for the opportunity to be here on this very prestigious panel. USAID has programs across the globe trying to build a more peaceful and prosperous world. It's a tough time right now to be trying to build a more peaceful world. Mike, you mentioned the 17-year democracy deficit. We're at an all-time high or low trust deficit. People across the globe have lost trust in their institutions, in their governments, hopefully not in themselves. And it's no coincidence then that we have more conflict going on in the world than any time in the last 30 years. There are more people displaced than any time since World War II. Now, every conflict is different, but almost all of them share one thing: poor and weak governance in that country. Strong government comes about through trust and inclusiveness. So if you want to build trust in institutions, if you want to build trust in government, go to any community on the globe. The most trusted and most respected leaders are going to be your religious leaders. People literally put their faith in them. So I can't think of a single program that USAID has working at a community, local level that does not include faith leaders and faith-based organizations. A place like Nepal, a place like Niger, a place like Burkina Faso, where we use faith leaders to build out networks, which then build the resilience of those communities. We would be missing an entire opportunity and probably getting nowhere if we weren't engaging systemically and strategically with faith-based groups. So in September, we released the USAID's Strategic Religious Engagement Strategy, where we offer tools so that every one of our 13,000 staff around the world and all of our implementing partner staff can see that to engage everywhere and anywhere they can with faith-based groups and religious leaders at every part of what we call our program cycle. So when we're assessing what we should do in a country, when we're determining what our strategy should be, when we're co-designing and then implementing and then monitoring and evaluating our programs, whatever that program might be, it could be agriculture, it could be civil society, it could be working with the government. But we strategically engage with faith-based leaders throughout that cycle, and that is where people place their trust. That is where we're going to get authentic leadership. That's where we're going to get inclusiveness and hopefully build more resilient, stronger societies, and hopefully get to a more peaceful world.
Thank you. Mike Abramowitz, I wonder if I could come back to you on the potential tensions and the potential clash of rights, whereby none of us, I'm sure, would want there to be hate speech. We all see the dangers of hate speech. None of us, particularly people of faith, would want or encourage blasphemy. And yet we know that blasphemy laws around the world do huge damage to religious freedom. And there is a danger that hate speech can curtail freedom of expression. So how do we reconcile these rights when there are those tensions?
Not easily. I think you're absolutely right, Ben, that with all these core rights that we're talking about, as my colleague knows, whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, there's a constant tension to be those rights. I'm a former journalist like you, and I think about this all the time in the terms of social media today is such an incredible purveyor of propaganda, in some cases incitement to murder, at the most extreme cases incitement to genocide. So we recognize there have to be some controls on that. On the other hand, I think the fundamental predisposition should be for robust speech. And that's why I think democracy is so important. Democracy is the only system that I'm aware of that can adjudicate between these competing interests, right? And I certainly trust democracies to do this more than autocracies or authoritarian regimes.
Thank you. Isabella, do you want to?
My next report to the UN Human Rights Council is on advocacy of hatred based on religion or belief. Within the UN system, within the human rights machinery, we've been very, very concerned about where is the threshold of Article 20 of the ICCPR about incitement to hatred, which one of the responses to which may be criminalization. We have a Rabat 6-part threshold test that really says that it's situational. There needs to be a deep analysis of context, audience, speaker, impact, et cetera, and so we have the, guidance from the international community developed over 20 years through cross-regional consultations, et cetera, that help us. But what I say in this report is that we shouldn't only be concerned about the gravity. Of course, we should be concerned about genocide and incitement to hatred and criminalization in very extreme circumstances where that might be necessary in order to protect. But every act of hatred should be a warning sign for states to act, because states have the obligation to act to address discrimination, to promote equality, to ensure due process, to allow for minority rights. And so, all of these are important and deserve an investment into the human rights machinery and society. And where there are cases that relate to this supposed clash, I would say that, freedom of religion or belief is also an expression right, yes? Otherwise, it's my right to hold in the privacy of my own chamber my religion or belief. Of course, there's also the guarantee of manifestation of religion or belief, including with others. It's also a minority right, it's a group right, it's a collective right. So in all of these circumstances, freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief are reinforcing rights. They inform one another and go along, as you were saying right at the beginning, assembly, association, etc.
Thank you. Robert, do you have a comment on this? And then I have a last question in the final.
Go with your last question.
Okay, so if you can keep your responses as brief as possible. We have just under 3 minutes left. I want to ask two questions together. How can people who are working in religious freedom utilize the mechanisms of government, of multilateral organizations like the UN, and of civil society to better promote FORB? And alongside that, what is the role of religious figures? We've seen throughout history, William Wilberforce, Desmond Tutu, Pope John Paul II, who have championed religious freedom. What's their role in defending the religious freedom of others and human rights more broadly?
So I had the great honor of working for Archbishop Desmond Tutu in Cape Town for 2 years. I was a lot younger then. Persistent, consistent messaging, always telling the truth, understanding the interplay. To watch Desmond Tutu drive into a township and meet with people living in a shack, and then drive directly to Parliament and meet with F.W. de Klerk, and understanding success is going to come about by having both of those involved. The harnessing of civil society, the harnessing of emotion and intellect at the same time, and making sure that you are engaging government. If it's positive, great. If it's negative, then engage government in a negative way. But you can't do it just with civil society or just with government alone.
There's a brief word on that.
Faith-based actors are already very active in reporting, in engaging at the country level, in bringing violations to the attention of the mechanisms, and I hope that that continues. They are also imbued with values. Many faith-based actors have values that also can contribute to breaking down barriers and to inclusivity. As of last Friday, faith-based actors can also contribute to the work of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights financially. So they've been doing it in other ways, but also financial contributions to many causes that many faith-based actors care about: peace, child rights, death penalty, and other rights.
Thank you. And Mike, final word in 20 seconds.
Okay, 2 quick points. Vibrant civil society, which include religious organizations, is an absolutely critical part of democracy, because those are the groups that are going to hold government to account. And the second thing, it's very important for people to defend the rights of others. So it's important for Christians to defend the rights of Jews, Jews to defend the rights of Muslims. It's one thing to call for protection of your own people, but it's really important to call for the protection of other people.
Absolutely. And that's bang on time. A fantastic note on which to end. We could have discussed this for so much longer, but time has run out. To our distinguished panel, thank you very much. Thank you.